This is the tone video segment for You've Got Another Thing Comin'. This song uses several different guitar sounds, and these are sort of important things to know about that we're going to address in this tone video. Judas Priest was, of course, a very groundbreaking metal band, and a lot of bands pattern themselves off of a lot of things that they did. One difference between sort of a classic heavy metal approach, what we hear today, is how the guitars function as far as what's going on in the bass part of the EQ range and how palm muting affects that. A lot of times we get used to a real bass push when we're palm muting. If you listen to this sound, there's actually quite a bit more treble going on. We don't get really the palm muting bounce that we're used to. And so what's basically happening is you get that push by layering the guitars, by having like two of every rhythm guitar double tracked, but also just by picking very hard. So I'm using a pretty strong pick here. And also just being really tight between the bass and the drums. And that's how they achieved a lot of that heavy sound. Nowadays, we get amps that sort of push the drive up to the point where we get that sound just with one guitar almost. So let's talk about this main sound that we get for the power chord part of the guitar tone. So for this, we've basically got a plexi amp, sort of a classic amp, 4x12 cabinets, and let's talk a little bit about how the EQ's dialed in. The treble is up all the way, as is the drive, and so that's going to give you a lot of that real heavy crunch. The presence is up almost all the way because it's a real in-your-face kind of sound. Depending on your amp, I'd also set the mids up about 2/3 and the bass a little below 2/3. That's for sort of their model of amp. Depending on what you have, if it's something more modern, you're actually going to have to turn the bass down a little bit to get that same kind of sound. Some other important things with this main rhythm tone, there's obviously quite a bit of modulation on it, and that's a sine chorus. And so with that, you want to have the effect up pretty high. You don't want a whole lot of rate on it to where it's giving you sort of that warble effect, but you just want that to ring out on the chords, and you can hear that on the top of these chords as they're coming through. So that gives you sort of that interesting processed feel. As far as the reverb, you're going to want to use a plate reverb if that's something that you have on your amp or effects processor. And I have that dialed in somewhere between 20 and 30% on that, and that'll get you pretty close to their effect. Now there's a couple other sounds that we have on here. One is a clean tone, and for that you can hear it's just real simple. I just sort of have the same amount of chorus dialed in on that, so you just use your amp's clean channel. That also doesn't have a whole lot of bass on it. It's not real trebly either, so you sort of want to boost the mids on that a lot and take the treble down a little bit so it doesn't become too bright. So we hear that part on the bridge of the song. Now the solo tone, let's get to that. For that, as I'll mention in the clip, we're going to use a wah filter. And so a couple things that I've done with this, I've actually dialed in a compression pedal. And a compression pedal basically sort of narrows the dynamic response of what you're playing. So it gives you the ability to sustain a little bit more. It can also make some louder sounds softer. And so with that compression, I've got that dialed in a little bit. I've also got a noise gate on this just to clean it up a little bit. I doubt they would have used that at the time, but it helps for recording for our purposes. As far as using the wah as a filter, we're just going to click that on and leave it in the treble position. And what that allows us to do is bring out some different harmonics. And so when we're hitting these bends, you can hear that they're a lot more piercing. I'll play the beginning of the solo. You can hear how with that compressor, it just makes the note sustain all day long. And so with that, what I do is on the amp, I take down the treble just a little bit to sort of reduce a little bit of the effect of the wah. I boost the mids up a little bit to soften that. And I'm actually also using an EQ pedal to add in some mids also to soften up the wah. And then, of course, there's some places in here where he really brings out that wah sound a little bit, like in the middle of the solo. And so what that wah basically does is gives you that W effect in the middle of the solo, but also it helps a lot of harmonics come out more easily later in the song. And with that EQ where I've dialed in that mids, that helps me to play some of the melody without having too piercing of a sound when I'm not actually using the wah. Here's like the second part of the solo. And so you can hear as I'm sustaining that note, we're getting some harmonics ringing out just by holding the note and sustaining it. So you'll hear that throughout the solo. So those are the tones for You've Got Another Thing Coming. This is the intro for Guitar 1 on You've Got Another Thing Coming by Judas Priest. The song is in the key of F sharp minor, and we're in standard tuning. If you look at the menu, we've got two guitar parts here, and listening to the original recording, the parts are really stacked up, and so that's one thing that they do to kind of get their signature sound. If you watch the tone video, you can see where we talk about some of the effects and amp settings that they use to get that sound. But generally, Judas Priest has two guitarists, and you can sort of tell on stage the parts that they take, but then there's a lot of other guitar parts tracked on that recording. And so one of the first things that we'll notice is that there's this F sharp pedal note just going through the song quite a bit. And sometimes that's sort of officially the second guitar part playing that, but sometimes it's just an overdub used to thicken up the sound with the bass. So we've got a few options as we go through the video clips, and I'll try to outline where those are and what each guitar is doing. So guitar 1 is the one that we're referring to that's going to sort of take the lead and play the solo. So I'll go ahead and play the intro at speed, and then we'll slow it down and take a look at what's going on. So we start out just on an F sharp power chord that we're playing for 3 measures, just repeating, and then we play into a 4th measure and we're just doing that as 8th notes, just downstrokes. As we get to the end of that 4th measure, on the and of 4, we're going to hit an E power chord. So that comes in on the and of 4, so it's a syncopated entrance, and we've just got this fingering, first finger on the 2nd fret, 3rd finger on the 4th fret, and 4th finger on the 5th fret. 2nd fret there on the 4th string, 3rd string, and 2nd string. We're going to hold that into the next bar, and on the and of that bar, we'll then go to a B power chord. So that's a power chord built off of the 5th string, 2nd fret, and 4th fret. And then on the and of 4 of that bar, we're then going to go to an F sharp power chord. That's going to ring for the whole next bar and on to beat 1 of the bar after that. So we've essentially got 1, 2, 3, 4. After beat 1, we're going to be on the and of beat 1. We're going to use this first finger to grab the 2nd fret on the 3rd and 4th string. Now, something kind of interesting here. You've got that F sharp pedal going the whole time. And to my ear, on the original recording, I distinctly hear the first guitar going and going down and hitting that F sharp. However, there's some times where you might see them playing on stage, and it seems like all they're doing is just going, not even bothering with that low note. So that's an option. If you've got that second guitar hitting that note down there, you don't really have to rock that first finger back and forth, and you can just hit it like that. without having to worry about your sixth string. So the way that I hear it played on the recording, however, we're going to hit that second fret with sort of the back of the first finger. Then we're going to do a hammer-on from the open sixth string to the second fret, then use the back of that finger again to hit the second fret up on the third and fourth string again, back down to the second fret on the sixth string, then up to the fourth fret on the third and fourth string, and then back up to that power chord. So that would look like this. One more time on that. Then we have that same chord figure again. And now we'll have the same lick, but this time we end on an F sharp power chord, and I like to kind of hit that as an upstroke. And that's going to ring into the verse. So let's go ahead and play the intro at half speed. I'm going to kind of skip all of that F sharp power chord at the beginning, but let's just start on that fourth bar where we come in with that syncopated entrance. Gets us through the intro for Guitar 1 on You've Got Another Thing Coming. This is the verse segment for Guitar 1 on You've Got Another Thing Coming. I'll go ahead and play the verse at speed, and then we'll slow it down and take a look. So the verse has a lot of repeated sections. We're starting out with just an F sharp power chord that's going to ring for 2 full bars. Comes in on the and of 4 off of the intro. And it's going to ring through onto beat 1 of that third full bar. And then we're going to come in with the picking on the and of 1 of that third full bar. Now essentially what this is doing is it's mixing up regular strokes with the pick and then palm mutes. So that first power chord that we're going to hit is just going to be a regular stroke. Then we're going to go back down and palm mute it. So coming off that, it's going to be 1. And then on beat 3, we're going to be doing the same thing. So it'll be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So faster, that sounds like this. And then we're still palm muting on beat 1 of the next bar. Then we've got a hammer-on from just the second finger on the second fret, hammering on to the 4th fret of the 4th and 5th string. So we're just letting off of that part of the chord. And then hitting the chord again. So far we've got. Then we're going to palm mute 2 more times. And on the last 2 eighth notes on beat 4, we're going to let off of that first finger and slur back on or hammer on to the 2nd fret. So that whole figure looks like this. And that takes us back into the part where we're going to have repeats. The second line of that, as you can see in your tab, is going to repeat 3 times. And we start out just hitting a power chord. So that's going to be palm muted for 2 full bars. And then in the last 2 bars of that, we're just repeating the last 2 bars of that first line. So we're just going to play that over. So you've essentially got the first line and then the second line repeated 3 times. The only other difference you're going to have is on the third verse, if you're playing Guitar 1's part, you're coming out of the guitar solo, and there's still a few licks and bends that are sort of working themselves out there, so you'll sort of pick up about 2/3 of the way through that first line when you're done with that. So I'll go ahead and play the first line and the second line of the verse. I won't play the whole thing, so it'll take forever. but we'll get through the first line and the second line at half speed. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So that gets us through the verse part for guitar 1. This is the pre-chorus segment for You've Got Another Thing Coming, guitar 1. I'll go ahead and play the pre-chorus at speed, and then we'll take a look at the chords we're playing. So the pre-chorus is all power chords, and guitar 1 and guitar 2 are playing this part. So we're going to be on the F sharp power chord to start off with. The only thing that's tricky about this at all is just the timing, and it's one of those things where if you overthink it, it almost makes it more complicated than it needs to be. I'll show you the beats that it's on, but really if you just sort of try to feel it, that may make more sense to you. I'm probably more guilty than anybody of trying to music theory things all the time, but this is just one of those parts where if you feel it, it'll probably be easier than trying to count it exactly. So we're going to play the F sharp power chord, which is going to ring for most of the first bar. On the and of 4, we're going to come up and hit this D power chord. A lot of times you'll see people hitting this chord like this. It's got the same notes in it. So the reason that I think it's played up on the 5th fret is because you hear the slide down to the B power chord. And you just can't slide if you're playing it here. So we've got the D power chord up here at the 5th fret and the 7th fret here, 5th fret on the 5th string. And then sliding down on the and of 4, we're going to a B power chord. That's going to ring for 3 beats in the following bar. And then on beat 4, we've got an open 6th string going to the F sharp. Now you could get away with just going, but I really hear him letting off of that string. Then we're going to hit that F sharp again, up to the D, down to the B power chord, and then we're going to hit an open A string on the 5th string and go to a C sharp power chord here on the 4th fret and the 3rd and 4th finger on the 6th fret. So let's play that one time at half speed. And that gets us through the pre-chorus segment for guitar 1. This is the chorus segment for guitar 1 on You've Got Another Thing Coming. I'll go ahead and play it at speed, and then we'll take a look. So the chorus that I played just now was the first chorus, and essentially there's a lick there at the end that guitar 1 and guitar 2 play, and that's what's going to change later on, so I'll point that out when we get to it. Starting out, we've still got this bar kind of on the 2nd fret, and we're just hitting a double stop on the 3rd and the 4th string, and then palm muting F sharps down here on the 2nd fret of the 6th string. Then we're going to go back and hit that double stop again. And you can see it's picked very hard, and it's also muted that second time. So it's just a real sort of short kick. And then we just keep muting that F sharp. Now when we get to the second bar, we've got one more hit on that F sharp. Then on the and of 1, we're going to hit this double stop. And then there's sort of a mute where it feels like he's going back down to the 6th string. That would be sort of on the and of 2. And then we're just hitting double stops on 2 and 4. So that whole first line Now on into the second line, we've got the basically first bar repeated, and then we've got a lick here at the end of the chorus. Now this lick is pretty much verbatim what we had at the end of the intro, where we had and hanging on that F sharp chord again. So we're just fretting that double stop on the second fret again, doing the open string, slurring to 2, grabbing the double stop again, hitting the 6th string up to the 4th fret double stop, and ending on that F sharp. Now, all the choruses after this are double choruses, which we'll have towards the end of the song. There's one, of course, where it's just the guitar playing, and that'll be a normal one. But other than that, the rest of them are double choruses. When we have those, that last lick is going to change a little bit. We'll have the one that we just played, which is the end of the first ending, where we've got. And then on the second line, instead of having the lick that we just played, we'll still have that hammer on from the open 6th string to the 2nd fret, but then we'll just have the 2nd fret going to the 4th fret double stop. So a double chorus would just repeat. I'll play one for us the whole way through so we can see what it looks like. So you can see how that just keeps looping. So let's go ahead and play the first chorus at half speed. And that's the chorus segment. This is the bridge segment for You've Got Another Thing Comin', Guitar 1. There's some chords that occur in the bridge with a cleaner sound, and you need to watch the Guitar 2 segment for the bridge if you need to see what those chords are. Guitar 1 has a lick which is sort of low in the mix, but it's some lead that's going on in the background. And so I'll show you what's being played there. We're basically doing a bend on the 4th fret. I'll play the lead and then we'll slow it down a little bit. One more time. This lead comes in right before an actual beat. So it's basically the last 16th note of beat 4. So it's coming in right before beat 1. And essentially, it's going to come in right on an F sharp minor chord. And so what we're doing is we're bending this B note up to a C sharp, which would be the 5th of that chord. So the chords of the bridge, we've got a B minor 7, B minor over A, and then an A chord, and then we're going into an F sharp minor chord. So right as we do that, we're bending this B up to the 5th, then we're releasing and doing a pull off to the 2nd fret, which is going to be an A, so that'll be like the 3rd of that chord. So we're holding that bend for 2 beats, and then on beat 3, we're still holding it, and then on the and of 3, we're actually going to release it. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. On 4, we're pulling off to 2, and then on the and of 4, we're grabbing that 4th fret again and bending back up to that 4th fret, and we're just going to hold that bend for 2 measures. And that goes through the end of the bridge, and then we're into the solo section. So let's play that lick really slow one time. So I'll count us into that bar. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So that gets us through the bridge segment for You've Got Another Thing Comin'. This is the Guitar 1 solo segment for You've Got Another Thing Comin'. I'll go ahead and play the solo at speed, and then we'll slow it down and take a look at the positions and the techniques. So this guitar solo is pretty piercing, and there's a couple tricks to that, and some of that we'll cover a little bit in the tone video, so make sure that you refer to that. But we are using a wah for this, and so we'll talk a little bit about how to get the entire tone. But for most of the solo, I'm using the wah as a filter, which means I'm going to click it on, and I'm just going to leave it down in the treble position. And what that's going to enable me to do is bring out some harmonics when I'm playing. Not always intentionally, but it gives you a pretty signature sound when you play your solo. There's a few notes in here where we will be using the wah effect to get that sweep out of the W sound, and I'll talk about where that is. So I'm going to leave that wah in the treble position for right now, and then I'll step on it again when we actually need that sound. So generally, if you were on stage, you'd probably just leave it dialed in there, and then you'd go grab it. Now, before I go through the positions of this solo, I should mention that if you watch any live shows of Judas Priest, there are some licks that he plays differently in here and some that he never plays the same way twice. And so there's a lot of signature things that you'll hear him always do, but some of the faster runs, you may see some performances where they're played differently. So let's start at the top. We're up here on the 22nd fret, so if you've got a 21 fret Strat, you may be out of luck here. But we're going to be on the 22nd, and we're basically bending a whole step. Now up here the frets get really small, and this becomes kind of a pain. So my solution is I've got the third finger on the fret I actually want to bend, which is the 22nd. And then I'm going to throw my second finger on the 21st, and then use my first finger either on the 19th or the 20th just to support it. And on each of these bends, we're holding them out for a beat and a half and then doing a little release. So we're just bending up a whole step, making that 22nd sound like the 24th. So you got to watch out for that second string not to make too much noise when you do that, so you want to try to mute that on the other fingers. Now the last bend, we're just going to bend up and hold it, and then we're going to roll over and grab this 22nd fret on the second string and actually throw some vibrato on that 19th fret. So one more time on that figure. And I'm going to slide off of that. Now I'm going to be down in 14th position. So this is sort of outlining an F-sharp minor pentatonic. Now I've got this figure next. And this is going to be played in triplets. So I'm coming in with this bend. It's a whole step bend on the 16th fret, bending up on the and of 1, and then I'm just playing triplets from beat 2. So the count there would be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and I'll end on beat 3 of the next bar. And here's where my wah starts coming in. The first time that we really hear it is going to be on the 17th fret in the next bar where we have, and so I use it to sort of accent this half step bend. So I'm going to use my third finger on the 17th fret, bend it up a half step, and release it. And I sort of just roll back the wah pedal and then roll it back on as I do that bend. Then I'm going to come back up and hit that 17th fret again, and I do the W. And it's really important to sort of know where on your wah pedal that W effect occurs, where you really get that wah sound, and that's where you want to kind of stick when you're rolling through it. And then on this quarter step bend on the next line, we're bending the 14th fret up just a quarter step. You can do that with your first finger. I've really got to get that W there. So I'm going to play that whole sequence. I'll start with the triplet line. I'll play that real slow. You hear how that 14th fret, those harmonics kind of ring out quite a bit with the wah used as a filter. Now going on to the next part with the wah very slowly. Now we come into another run, and now you can just leave your wah back down in the treble position. We still want it on in order to get a lot of the harmonics to come out, and we're coming up on one of those in just a second. I'll play this next line, and then we'll explain it. So what happens here is we start out with a 16th note triplet, just a quick hammer on and pull off, and then we're going 16, 14. This is kind of playing around with the blues scale. So this goes into straight 16th notes. 16, 14, then 16 and 15. So one more time. And then here's where we get this harmonic. And you hear that very loudly on the original recording. And so what's going to happen there is I'm just going to use the thumb to sort of pick the string along with the pick. And I'm hitting sort of, if you've got a guitar with two humbuckers, I'm aiming for in between those two humbuckers to get that harmonic. And that's going to ring out easier because of the wah. Then I just go straight down that blues scale. Now, if you hear some remnants of that note afterwards, that's because I've got a noise gate on. That wah can create a lot of extra noise when you're trying to play your solo, and so you'll hear it killing those notes off after I've hit them. In the context of playing the song, though, you won't notice that noise gate in the background as long as you don't have it turned up too high. And then following that, we're then just going to do the blues scale one more time, slide down to the 12th fret, and back up. So that whole sequence slowly. And you can see it's pretty easy to pull off that harmonic when you have the wah on. So one more time, really slow. Now we get to the next part. We're on a whole step bend once again, 17th fret of the 2nd string. So we're just bending that up a whole step, hitting it 3 times. And letting it fall. Now as I fall, I'm going to do a pull off to the 14th fret. So I pull off, then I go to 16 on the 3rd string, back to 14, then I'm kind of going down the minor pentatonic. So 14, 16, 14, 16, and then I'm taking the 14th fret on the 5th string and bending and releasing that. And I think it does that 3 times. So that whole figure will look like this. Then I immediately go down to this 12th fret on the 2nd string. And here's where we're doing sort of a sliding motion. And this is sort of a tricky lick. We're bending the 12th fret a whole step, releasing, and then pulling off to 10. Then going back to 12, and then I'm going to slide 10 down to 9. Then I'm going to hit 9 again and switch to my 3rd finger. And then I've got to immediately go down and hit 9 on the 3rd string. So that's just sort of a really cleverly phrased lick. One more time on that. The end of that, I'm bending twice on 9. One time it's sort of a slow bend, and then I do it a little faster and grab 10 on the 3rd string, back to 7, and then 10 on the 2nd string, and then bend up a whole step on the 9th fret. Moving on, now I'm back up at the 17th fret, bending up a whole step onto the first beat of the next bar, grabbing the 14th fret on the 1st string. Then I'm going to bend a whole step on 17 on the 1st string and release it. And now we get to sort of the last little sprint before we get to the end of the song. I'm going to play this through, and then we'll play it even slower. So let's look at how we're doing that. Basically, it starts out as an 8th note. I hammer on to 17 from the 14th fret. Then I go to triplets. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 from the 14th fret to the 17th fret on the 2nd string. Then I do a pull off and hammer on the 2nd string. And then I'm going to end that bar with 16th notes, 14 to 17 twice from the 2nd string to the 3rd string. So one more time on that. Then I go back to 8th notes, 16th fret to the 14th fret, 3rd string to 2nd string. And now I've got sort of this minor pentatonic type of sequence here. So I'm going 14, 14, then pulling 17 off to 14. And I do the same thing in 16th notes again, bending the 16th fret up a whole step and getting 14 on the 2nd string and the 1st string back to the 2nd string. So far we have now we go to a sextuplet, which is going to be 6 16th notes squeezed into one beat. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So in context, that whole bar. Then going into the next bar, I'm pulling 17 off to 14, and then going 16, sort of that same lick again. And now I'm going to stretch over and bend the 17th fret on the 2nd string up a whole step. So that'll look like this. I've got a little quintuplet in there where he's just kind of squeezing in a bunch of fast notes. Then another 16th note grouping. That's that last little figure starting on the 3rd beat of that bar. So let's play that whole sequence at half speed. So coming in on the bend. Then we hold that 16th fret for a whole measure, and then as we hold that, we're going to add the 17th fret on the 2nd string. It's important, this is a chordal bend, to have the right interval. So we're going to hold that out. Basically, we're bending this B note up to a C sharp, and then fretting an E on top of that. So we want an interval of a minor third. And then, as we go playing that in triplets, evenly, we're going to start releasing that to where it goes down to a second interval, a major second, that'll give us a little bit more dissonance in the interval. So we end up with a C and an E. So we're actually widening the distance. So we're going from that major third interval from the C to the E. So we're up at a C sharp, going down to a C, which is going to be a major third. So that's going to give us a little wider of an interval between those. And then I go down that major second like I was talking about, going from the B, which is right here when I unbend that, and then end up on the A. So one more time on that. We've got a C sharp to an E, unbending that a little bit to widen the interval and create more dissonance. And then I finally release the bend and land on the 14th fret of the 3rd string, and then I'm just going to slide down on the bottom string. So let's play the whole solo at half speed. And that's the solo for You've Got Another Thing Coming. this is the outro segment for Guitar 1 on You've Got Another Thing Coming. All we really need to know about the outro for the song is that we're going back to the power chords that we had on the intro segment for the first guitar. So guitar 2 is going to take over with the regular chorus riff. And all we're doing for the background in guitar 1 is just hitting the power chords. So a couple things about that. On the intro, of course, that first power chord came in on the and of 4. In this case, we're going to just come in on 1, but all the other power chords will be syncopated just like they were on the intro. So we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we'll have this lick that we've had in the chorus before, hitting that double stop 2, doing the hammer-on, and then 2 and 4. And then come back in with our chords right on beat 1. So I'll go ahead and play that at half speed. And that's just going to repeat as the song fades out. So that's the outro for Guitar 1. second guitar intro for You've Got Another Thing Coming by Judas Priest. This song is still in the key of F sharp minor, and we're still in standard tuning. As I mentioned in Guitar 1's parts, there are literally stacks of guitars tracked on this song, which is a lot of what gives it its distinctive sound. You can refer to the tone video to learn a little bit more about how they get their tone. We'll talk about in this second guitar part how the guitars are double tracked and the differences that you'll find. If you watch Judas Priest play live, you'll see that they have two guitars on stage, and we'll talk about in these segments how that works out as far as being on stage and then in the studio. One thing that you'll notice on the original recording is that there's this F sharp pedal just riding everywhere. And so there's times where it's obvious that that's just the second guitar part, but there's also other places where it's just an overdub thrown in to thicken up the sound. So I'll try to show you where that occurs. So let's go ahead and look at the intro and see the differences between this second guitar part from the first. The first thing is that for basically the whole thing, we're going to outline that pedal. And you can go ahead and just sort of hit that as a power chord, and you're going to want to palm mute that. And so that's just going to ride underneath that intro. Now, when the first guitar part comes in with those power chords, that's one of those places where we're just going to keep riding that F sharp pedal underneath that. So that'll keep going. Now, as the first guitar goes to do this little lick and goes back into the power chords, we're going to keep riding the F sharp underneath that. So basically, for the repeated bars at the beginning of the intro, and then for the first 1, 2, 3, 4, first 8 bars after that, you're just riding that F sharp power chord. Now, there's the last lick of the intro, as you can see in your tab, before it goes into the first verse. And that one, both guitars actually play together. So that's where we have this, and then we're on this F sharp chord. Sometimes when I play that, I like to just do an upstroke to grab that F sharp and just hit it like that for when it's going to ring. So that lick comes in on the and of 1, and we explained that in Guitar 1. So we're basically going to keep riding that F sharp, and then the last bar of the intro, and we're going to end on that F sharp power chord going into the verse. So that's the intro for Guitar 2. This is the Guitar 2 verse segment for You've Got Another Thing Coming. On Guitar 2 on the verse, we're playing similar material to Guitar 1, although you have a couple choices. If you listen to the original recording, you can hear a stereo track of the main part where you're holding that F sharp power chord out and then doing the accents. And that just kind of continues on in that fashion. So certainly if you were playing this with 2 guitar players, you may want to just mirror that part. However, you can still, underneath that, hear that F sharp pedal occurring. So that's one of those places where there is an overdub just to thicken it up. So while the other guitar is hitting those accents, you could just sit there on that F sharp pedal, thickening that up underneath. So you wouldn't necessarily have to do those hammer-ons at that place where you're going from the 2 to the 4. I would probably do the open 6th string, slurring up to the 2nd fret, because that open E could clash with that F sharp, and you'll hear that the bass actually plays that open E as well. So if you're going to do that, you're just going to ride that F sharp as a palm mute underneath and only hit that E, or you can just play exactly what Guitar 1 is playing, which will just thicken up the sound even more. Guitar 2 still lets that F sharp power chord ring out for the first 2 bars, just like Guitar 1. Now I will say this, after the guitar solo, Guitar 1 still has some licks that are sort of playing out over the 3rd verse at the beginning. And so at that point, I would have Guitar 2 playing the exact part that Guitar 1 usually plays to sort of make up for not having that regular power chord part in there. So got a couple choices in that section of the song. So that's the verse segment for Guitar 2. This is the pre-chorus segment for Guitar 2. On the pre-chorus, we're just playing exactly what Guitar 1 plays, just to have double guitars hitting those power chords. So we're going to be playing the same rhythm, same chords. And you don't really hear a pedal underneath those, you just hear the bass sort of keeping the low end going, so we're just going to sustain those chords. So I'll play through it once, but if you need an in-depth instruction of it, just watch the pre-chorus segment for Guitar 1. So that's the pre-chorus for Guitar 2. This is the chorus segment for Guitar 2 on You've Got Another Thing Coming. Guitar 2 is going to be, for the most part, playing what Guitar 1 is here, with one exception, and guess what? We're putting that F-sharp pedal on the bottom once again. So the first bar of the chorus will be just the same as Guitar 1, putting those double stops on the second fret. But then on the second bar, while Guitar 1 is hitting just the double stops, we're just going to keep riding that F-sharp power chord underneath. So that first line would look like this. And so we just provide that bottom end. Going under the second line, do the kicks again, and then we'll play that lick with Guitar 1 that goes back into the verse. Now on the double choruses, pretty much the same thing. We'll be playing the same lick every second line as Guitar 1, where we're going and then going back into the next line. So we'll be hitting those double stops as quarter notes along with Guitar 1. So I'll go ahead and play at speed because it's pretty similar to Guitar 1. I'll play the whole chorus. We'll play just a single chorus. And that gets us through the chorus for You've Got Another Thing Coming. This is the bridge segment for Guitar 2 on You've Got Another Thing Coming. We go to a clean tone that I'll talk a little bit more in the tone segment of the video. For the bridge, both guitars are just hitting similar chords. We're starting with a B minor 7, which is just your 5-string bar chord, so we're barred at the 2nd fret, 3rd finger's on the 4th fret of the 4th string, and 2nd finger's on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And we're going to play that twice. It's a bar each time, just ringing out as a whole note. If you listen to the bass, it starts out on a B note, and then the bass goes to an A note. So we could call that second chord a B minor 7 over A. So you may want to let your first finger up so that you can play that A along with the bass. So you'll have a B minor 7, then go to a B minor 7 over A by letting the 5th string ring open. Then just a regular A major chord. You can play that however you want. And then we'll go to an F sharp minor chord, and then we're back on B minor 7, B minor 7 over A to A major, and then we're going to end on a C sharp power chord. Just these 3 notes, and that's kind of when they're clicking back on the distortion to go into the solo section, so you'll just play that as a distorted power chord. So that's just a C sharp power chord at the 4th fret of the 5th string and 6th fret of the 4th string and 3rd string. And that's your bridge for You've Got Another Thing Coming. This is the solo segment for Guitar 2 on You've Got Another Thing Coming. It's pretty easy. We're just going to be reprising parts we've already played in the background of the guitar solos. So we're backing up the lead part. And basically, we're going to be playing through the first line of the chorus, but this will be the first line of what Guitar 1 was playing. So we'll be going like this. And we'll do that 4 times. So we're just going to keep repeating that underneath the solo. Now, after we do that 4 times, we're then going to play the pre-chorus verbatim. So we'll be playing the exact chords, both lines that we had in the pre-chorus. And of course, both guitar parts on that are the same. So that's the last part of the guitar solo. Now, after that pre-chorus part, the solo is going to end with a lick. And the lick is this. So what I'm going to do, it's so easy it doesn't really warrant needing to play it the whole way through. Just know that you play that first line 4 times and then the whole pre-chorus. But I'm going to start on that pre-chorus and then I'll play that lick so you can see it in context. And then I'll also play that lick at half speed so you can grab it. But other than that, the timing on that's pretty obvious, as we've already looked at that pre-chorus and chorus before. So here is the pre-chorus going into that final lick of the solo. So starting on F sharp. And then of course we end on that F sharp minor that goes into the next verse. Now let's play that lick at half speed. The lick comes in on the and of 1. So we were on that C sharp power chord. Then we have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 ending on that F sharp power chord. So one more time. 2, 3, 4, 1. And that's the background to the solo part for Guitar 2. This is the outro segment for Guitar 2 on You've Got Another Thing Coming. On the outro, Guitar 2 is sort of having to take over Guitar 1's part again. Guitar 1 starts playing the power chords from the intro. So we're having to sort of take over that part in the background as the song fades out. And I'm sure that on the original recording, there's probably an overdub below that with that F sharp on the bottom some more. But the part we're going to be playing is pretty much verbatim of Guitar 1's part on the chorus. So this will be the first line of that outro. And then the second line, we're just going to end with that lick that has 2 staccato quarter notes at the end. So that'll look like this. And those 2 lines are just going to repeat over and over as the song fades out. So I'll play it at half speed. And of course it would also repeat over and over and over afterwards. And that's the outro for You've Got Another Thing Coming. This is the Guitar 2 performance for You've Got Another Thing Coming.